What I'm gonna show you guys today is one of the biggest weaknesses in most people's jiu-jitsu game, and they don't even know it. A lot of people think of pinning as something that you focus on mainly when you're a beginner, and it's just a fundamental. But there's really two main aspects of this that is so important at the absolute top level. Number one is it's the ultimate threat behind your guard pass. If you pass your opponent's guard, ultimately you're gonna control them in side control, north-south, or mount. And when you get to that position, you want to be able to submit them, and your ability to submit them is going to be based upon how strong your pinning mechanics are. Secondly, and just as important, is understanding that to ultimately pass the guard, you have to get around your opponent's guard and hold them in side control or north-south for at least 3 seconds. Your ability to deeply understand how to pin them well will directly translate in your ability to make the transition from the passing phase into the pinning phase. So by working on this, reverse engineering, it will actually make your guard passing significantly better. So in this video, first, I'm gonna focus on the core principles at play that are necessary to have strong pins and submissions. And then I'm actually gonna show a lot of details that are gonna be very counter what you have learned in the past for controlling your opponent, that is going to make it almost impossible for people to escape and also make them miserable on bottom of your pins. And then I'm gonna go into discussing how you can use these same principles and connect them into your guard passes to make your guard passing more smooth and seamlessly transition into attacking in pins. So the first principle to understand is that the core foundation of all pins is shoulder blade pinning or hip pinning. In this video, we're mainly gonna focus on shoulder blade pinning because it's the most dominant and it's usually what's gonna lead to upper body submissions. We will address the hips a bit, but we're mainly focused on the shoulders. The idea is that we always learn different things like cross faces and overhook grips and blocking the hip and all these things, but these are all tools to help accomplish the main goal of keeping both of our opponent's shoulder blades on the mat. It's just like in pro wrestling, right? You're trying to keep both shoulder blades pinned to the mat. As soon as you see the shoulder blade come up, he's starting to alleviate the pressure on it. So no matter what I'm doing with my hands, I'm always trying to accomplish that goal. Whether I'm in side control, I'm in north-south, I'm in mount, I'm always gonna be trying to maintain that objective. So now let's look at the basics of controlling from side control. So again, the first main concept is the idea of using chest pressure to pin. A lot of people get really fixated on the crossface, and of course the crossface is great because usually when people learn it, the person's not resisting and they can like crush the neck like this. But the reality is they're always gonna try to shrimp out and move and get the shoulder up by scooting away like this. If we use our chest pressure instead, so a drill I like to use to demonstrate this is I'm just gonna put both hands on the floor. So you can see he's either gonna bring this shoulder up or he's gonna bring this shoulder up. And I'm gonna use the center of my chest to kind of move forward or backwards to lock that down. So for example, let's say he was to turn towards me. If I shift way over here, I'm using the center of my chest to drop down. One main tool for helping with this, it's almost like you're pinching a pencil between your shoulder blades. I roll my shoulder blades back and I pull my chin back like this to push my chest forward because that makes a heavy center of gravity to drop to pin it. So when I'm here like this and he turns towards me, you see I can shift over like this. If he turns the other way, I back up and I sink like this. And I'm always trying to follow that. Side control, north-south, any of these pins, they're not gonna be a static thing where you lock the guy in and hold him. You have to move and adjust to follow like a compass pinning the shoulder blades. So another major concept with dropping the chest pressure is the idea of opening the knees wide. A lot of people when they're in side control, they'll have their legs kind of close like this and it's hard to be heavy. When I open my knees really wide, it allows me to drop my chest. If I don't have an opponent there, you can kind of look at it, right? When I'm here, I can only drop to here. When I open the knees wide, I can drop my chest down, and that allows me to distribute my weight on him, right? So I'm here like this, I open the knees wide. I still want to keep my knees close because if I do this too much, now his knee will have room to kind of come in here and fight to try to recompose, right? So we want to keep the knees close, but open them really wide. You can even bow the feet out. If I want to, I can switch up to the toes really easy. You can kind of lightly be like this, but I like to keep this really wide, and now I can start dropping the chest heavy here. So now discussing the purpose of the crossface. Of course, I use it sometimes to crush on the neck like this and turn them in, but the reality is that this arm is much more useful to me as an assistant to help pull my chest into them more. So a lot of people think of this crossface almost as like a rolling into the shoulder motion. I think of it more as pulling my elbow to the ceiling like this, because I'm trying to pull my chest into him more. This makes you even heavier. Even if you're lighter, you're gonna feel really heavy. So when I grab here, you can get what grip's comfortable. You could grab here. Sometimes I can do the collar, armpit, you see, and I pull my chest in like this. Now as he tries to move and start moving around, I stay really heavy. Another two things I like to do is I use my elbow here on the hip like this, like there, and I have my right knee tight on his hip here, and I pin it in tight, and I stay on the chest. If he turns into me a bunch, turn in, I lean over. If he goes the other way, I back up. If he tries to roll me that way, I can always post, right? But I'm like balancing on my chest. And this is important. If too much of your pressure comes from the crossface arm, it's really hard for you to suddenly switch your attack, because when you take that arm off, you lose all of your control. But when I have chest pressure like this, now I can do things like shift my arm around to attack this, switch up to north-south, start going here and switching up to mount. Your arms are more stable. Even here, without having good grips, if he turns into me, you see, I'm still pinning with the chest, right? So now we're gonna start talking about the north-south position. The north-south position, in my opinion, is one of the most underappreciated positions in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. People often undervalue it because there's less submissions from it than you think of in side control or mount. But the real importance of this position is that very often when you're passing the guard, especially versus the most flexible and difficult opponents, you will have to consolidate the guard pass into the north-south position. And this is because often when you try to consolidate in side control, your opponent will have their elbow-knee space connected so well, it's impossible. And this is where going to north-south is much better. So if you know how to control it well, you'll be better at finishing the pass, as well as transitioning from north-south to reverse side control will make it easy to set up mount. And of course, there's also submissions you can set up from north-south as well. Also guys, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to like and leave a comment and let me know what you would like to see in future videos, or if you had any questions about the techniques I show in this video. So there's two main reasons I shift to north-south. One is when I'm trying to consolidate a guard pass, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And the other is when side control becomes difficult. So often when I'm controlling side control, my opponent might get a really good frame in my neck to the point that I can't even get my chest weight down. When this happens, what I'll do is I'll shift my arm over the head, and this allows me, even if he keeps framing the neck, to shift my body weight over him more. Again, the core goal is to keep his shoulder blades pinned. So I have my chest here, and now if he turns into me, I already have my chest weight down. If he goes the other way, I can lean back. So now I'm gonna switch my right hand to this side of the hip here, like so, and I can start shifting up towards the north-south position. The goal is to always keep the shoulder blades pinned, and I kind of have to move and adjust based upon how he moves. So I talked in the beginning about using your chest pressure to pin, but I can also use my hips or my mid-core as well. So in this case, for example, if he was to turn to his right, I can use my chest to pin. But if he was to try to turn to the left, I can sink my hip here like this. You can use whatever tool you need. The main goal though is to always keep them pinned. From here, I can usually use this to consolidate passes. Of course, you can go for attacks. I can also use this to shift up to reverse side control and start working to mount and attacking from here. So now we're gonna start talking about the reverse side control, which is easy to get to from either side control or north-south. So we'll start from side. So here, again, the guy's framing my neck. I'm gonna go over the shoulder like this. And from here, I have that same kind of control. But now what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna switch my hip down this way and kind of sit on him with my hip. It's important to note that I can do an over the shoulder grip with my left arm here, or I can be under the shoulder. Either way is going to be very effective. I usually set this one up from north-south. I'll show that soon. So in this case, I'm over the shoulder like this. And again, it's the same idea. I want to sit my weight on him. A lot of people make the mistake of sitting on the floor like this, but then he can fight and turn into me and stuff, right? So when I sit all the way up on him, so you see my hip is in the air, actually sitting on him like this. Now, if he was to try to turn to the left, I can kind of sink my hip to lock him down. If he turns to his right, I can really lean far over here and keep the shoulders pinned. Again, the whole idea is keeping the shoulders pinned. Even if he rocks really hard to the left and I get off balanced, I can always post my hands here like this. I'm keeping the shoulders down. From here, one of the most common ways to attack, I'm just gonna push one of these legs down and I'm slowly gonna start looking, because he can't see, to throw my heel over here, Once my heel comes over, I catch like right under the hamstring like this, and I'm gonna cut in here to press this leg down. I can even throw over my own arm. I can push this. I can even slide the knee over, sometimes switch and drop the hip. So now looking at the transition from north-south, so we're gonna be over the shoulder here. I switch my hand like before, and I come up to the north-south position. It's important to mention on this side, my right arm is already, instead of being here, it's gonna be here, and I'm gonna shift to the other side. So now I have this arm locked out. It's hard for him to get that back in. I'm pinning, and on this side, I have to get rid of this arm. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push it down, and I'm gonna shoot my knee over it so I can start coming into this position. And now it's basically the same method of control. I'm using my hips on him to pin him. It's just that this far arm is already locked out, so it's even easier. So from here, I can kind of control. When I'm ready, I can throw my leg over to mount and sit up and do all the same finishes. Another point to mention here is that I'm trying to keep him flat, but sometimes as you initiate the position or you just mess up, he turns into you and he gets to a certain point that I can no longer flatten him out. If he's a little bit back, I can always re-flatten, but once it goes so far, it's like it tipped over like a seesaw. You can't get it back. At this point, once the back starts to come over, it's going to start to become chest to back control. And this is the nature of all forms of back control. So as he turns in and comes up to his knees, like this, you see I'm already attaching my chest to the back. And now I'll end up doing another video full in depth on this. Once my chest is on the back, that's how I start taking the back. But once I connect here, even if he rolls to his right shoulder now, you see my chest is already under the back. Now this is how you control the back and make transitions. So understanding that the base idea is you're pinning your opponent, you're trying to keep their shoulder blades flat, use your chest to control. But if they oscillate so far over that you cannot do that, you're going to start looking for chest to back control or front headlock threats. So now loosely talking about mount, I did an entire breakdown on mount before. I'll put the video here so you can check that out if you want, but just a quick overview on it. So again, the main concept here is chest pinning, right? So I like to use my chest to pin the shoulder blades. I try to stay as low as I can in the beginning, and then I start to progress for my attacks from here. But one extra detail added since the last video I did is this idea of hip pinning, right? So sometimes when I want to attack the upper body, my chest being here makes it hard to come up with my arms. So if instead of pinning with the chest, sometimes when he tries to turn to his right, I can drop my hip really heavy here. So I kind of push my hips to the mat. And if he goes the other way, I sink my hip that way. That keeps his hips square, which stops all elbow escapes. Also makes the kipping escape hard because if my torso is tight, he can't even get his hands in. From here, it's easier to go for collar chokes because my upper body is lightened and I can start building for attacks here while keeping him pinned without having to stay chest to chest the whole time. And now for perhaps the most important part of this video, we're going to discuss how all of these different pins naturally fit into the finish of every single guard pass that you do. Ultimately, all a guard pass is transitioning from being in the open guard into one of these pins. So I'm gonna show 4 or 5 different guard passes and how it directly connects into each different pin variation that we covered in this video. All right, so we're gonna talk about connecting with side control first, then north-south, and then the reverse side control. So the first thing to understand is if you're passing towards side control, we'll always have to deal with the elbow-knee connection issue. If his elbow and knee is connected, we're gonna look more at north-south, and we'll talk about that later. But when the elbow and knee is connected, I can never truly be in side control. So you may deal with this if you do a Toreando, for example, by snapping this elbow knee space open here, and I can kind of come in and consolidate here. Sometimes I'll snap this space open and come in with like the knee on belly, control the arm and try to get in. Another really common way is in a knee cut. So I'm knee cutting through, his elbow and knee is connected, and my knee is coming from the inside into this gap because I can't get in from the outside. And I'm gonna pull this arm. But notice all of these, as I'm going into the finish on sight, I need to flatten the shoulders. So when we're in the pin, we can use our chest to flatten, but in the past, we often have to use different tools. Like for example, this tricep pull-up is flattening him center so I can eventually consolidate to the chest. So now talking about north-south. In this case, what happens is our opponent has the elbow knee very well connected. Maybe it's even so tight that the knee cut wouldn't work. So in these cases, when it's too difficult to disconnect the space, often going to north-south is easier. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to deflect the feet. I did a video on this recently, and I'm trying to find some way to get above the guy. I can do this with a Toreando or many different passes. From here, even though his elbow and knee is really connected, I can block the feet out as he tries to bring them in, and I can slowly dig and work the legs down from here and to consolidate. And you don't just have to do this when doing a Toreando, you can do it in knee cuts or really any pass scramble you do. So if I try to go for a knee cut, for example, and he knee shields really hard here, like this, then as I go, I can't get inside that space, but I can shift my arm over like this and fast spin here to try to consolidate. And now again, I'm coming into that north-south scramble. Another common way you might do this is, let's say I'm trying to finish a normal side control finish in like a Toreando, and he turns enough in like this here, right? What happens is he's already framing me like this, and now it's gonna be really hard to cross-face and consolidate. You can see how this is just like side control when they frame. So in this case, I'm switching my arm over, and now I'm driving with my chest. So as he turns into me, I have the arm over the shoulder and I try to drive with my chest. As he goes in more, I use the chest to steer him flat so I can consolidate here and come up to north-south. So now we're gonna talk about passing towards the reverse side control situations in a few different ways. So one really easy way to get here is in any form of back step pass. So for example, if I'm in like an X guard type situation like this with single leg X here, is as I push this foot off, what I do is I drop my hip down here and I start sinking my hip. And you can see this is already, as he starts to turn in and fight, and I backstep, it's already turning into the same mechanism of control where I'm pinning with the hip here, right? So as he turns in, I can kind of lean my weight in and start sinking on him. And as I mentioned before, I can either consolidate the pass, or if he turns in so much, he keeps coming in, keep coming up. Yeah, it's gonna turn all the way into a back take, and I can attack from here. So now looking at the reverse side control coming from north-south. So now maybe I come in on like a north-south style finish, and I'm digging here and I have his feet blocked out, but I can't fully consolidate to north-south. So sometimes in this case, once I go in here, what I do is I focus on getting this knee open here, and now I can start switching out to consolidate in here. You have to kind of feel this out. I'm trying to finish north-south, but depending on how his arms are positioned, I can go in differently. So again, I might be here and I get in like here like this, I push this down, dig in, and end up in this kind of position again. So mount pressure when passing is a little bit less common, but it is used. One of the ways I'll go about it is if I'm in the center, like fighting De La Riva, I'll kind of do this drop pass where I overextend this leg backwards and I drop here. Now, even though I'm not fully in mount, my body is parallel to him, and this kind of chest pressure here is the exact same force I use when controlling mount. So I'll keep the chest pressure, I clear my legs, and I can even try to go to mount directly. Another way people commonly use this is in folder passes, right? So I might fold his legs over, pin this leg with my hip, and as I start to catch here, I consolidate. And now as he turns into me, I use my chest to flatten, and I start progressing up straight away.